Pastor Steve. Yes, my parents are in town. I hope it's a fun time. If I talk a little more Southern, it's because my mom's in the room, all right? It always lasts when I'm on the phone for her for an hour that I talk like this. But anyway, it's good to worship with you all and share the word with you. Growing up, it's kind of strange. I remember my most vivid memory of church is we would worship in the gym, and our praise leader, like Bobby O, would come up with his Southern accent. I don't know why he has a Southern accent, but he would say things like, "It is good to give thanks to the Lord, amen." Right? And then that pause, right? That was way more responsive than how I grew up. As a youth kid, it was always like, sure, right? And, we would always begin with a psalm and try to get us into worship and stuff. And this is one of those phrases. It is good to give thanks to the Lord. That on the surface, it seems super basic or simple. And without a lot of thought, it's just like, okay, give thanks to the Lord. That's it, right? But as I was reflecting and trying to repetitiously read this chapter of Psalm 92 over and over again, it made me reflect, and hence why I titled it just verbatim, why does the psalmist say it is good to give thanks? He could have just said, give thanks, for he is worthy. Or he could have said, it is right to give thanks, right? But he said it is good, right? I don't even know if it's a strong connection. This word good, I'm not going to pretend like it's a very special use. The word good is used all over the Old Testament. Maybe the most memorable one is, it is good that God declared, all the days of creation and things like that, right? It's this idea that when he looks at things, this is the design that he has for us. And, our passage, this phrase, it is good, it kind of defines, and he kind of has three phrases that he repeats off of it. It's not my 3 sermon points, okay? But he does say it is good to give thanks. It is good to sing praises, as we've just done, and I'll say literally verbally. This is not private worship within our little hearts that's silent. It's actually vocalized praise. And to declare your steadfast love in the morning. And commentators make this note, right? That it is not only right to give thanks to the Lord, but it is good in the sense that it is good for us. It uplifts us, it frees us, it liberates us. And the question is, what does it free us from? I don't think you have to be a follower of Jesus or a follower of God to recognize that thankfulness generally leads to good things, right? Secular studies prove that if you are a complaining, whiny person and you live and you work in a place where everyone's complaining about all the problems and it creates a culture and gives permission for everyone else to complain, you know what that's like, amen, right? But studies say that something about verbally expressing thanks changes not only the people around you, but yourself, right? Even if you feel like it's fake initially, you giving thanks and saying something more positive versus complaining, you having gratefulness for things that are right, changes things. It actually changes you. And I think that's the sense that the psalmist wants to start us off with this in this passage this morning. It is good for you, for those around you, in the setting of corporate worship for him, to give thanks to the Lord, to sing praises, and to declare his steadfast love. Because we live in a very perpetually complaining culture. Right? We just do. There's always something wrong. There's always something, the glass is always empty. And even ourselves, I don't know if you're the person who can stuff things. I'm a stuffer. Anyone else in here? Where you can kind of just complain inwardly, and because it doesn't go outwardly, you tell yourself you're doing better than the person who's always talking outwardly. But inwardly, you still have a very bitter heart, right? And you can keep it together, but there's a moment where that cracks, and wow, you just shocked the whole room, right? And it leaks out. And so I think the psalmist is trying to tell us, complaint obviously drains the joy, the liveliness out of everything and everyone. And so I think when he says it is good to give thanks, he's instructing us not only to do what is right, but what is good, right? He is directing our attention, this is what John Bloom says, he is at the same time directing our attention away from things that are draining our hope and fueling our discouragement to what will fill us with hope and fill us with courage. The commands of God are themselves grace gifts. Y'all need to hear that. The commands of God are grace gifts, not restrictive things from an angry parent, right? They are grace gifts given to us. Thanksgiving is a gift to us to both give God the glory he deserves and to lift yokes from us that feel so heavy in order that we might receive joyful rest for our souls. So are y'all catching this? Giving thanks is good for us. It pulls us out of this perpetual state of discontentment, of envy. Envy so strong. Of comparison, of self-absorption. I don't have that. I don't have that. Why do they have that? I should have that. How come no one recognizes me? No, how come no one gives me thanks? How come I don't have any time for myself? Anyone in that? A little exposed here. I mean, be honest. Like, I don't know. Like, just because we don't say it doesn't mean it's not there. And the person who sees it the most is spouse, family, and children. Right? Because you can show up on a Sunday and keep it together, but it's the home, right? And so the psalmist is telling us, and he's on a Sabbath day in the corporate worship setting, trying to tell all the people of God, remember, it is good to give thanks. He's not saying give thanks just because. He's saying it is good for you to give thanks and to remember. Same thing could be said about singing. I don't know how you grew up in church, whether you grew up from a really singing church, hands-raised church, moving, you know, that this is, I don't know if it's a millennial thing, you got that, the vibing church. You know, especially when you feel that bass hit, right? But the main thing that the scriptures tell us, and I think it's really beautiful how the Psalm 92 tells us, to the music of the lute and the harp, to the melody of the lyre, it's trying to say that there's music, it's lively in a certain sense. Now, it's not showy, it's not performative, but it is verbal. And so if I can encourage you, the Psalms actually, the reason why it's called the Psalms, which is song, is to encourage you as the people of God to verbally give thanks, right? To verbally give thanks. My definition of discipleship isn't meeting up with someone and giving them theology, right? As much as that's important. Discipleship is a parent who sings, who gives thanks, who asks for forgiveness, and their kids catch on, right? There are no more powerful moments, honestly, in my spiritual life and why I'm saved today than a room of old people singing. When the music wasn't that good. Amen? Yeah. So verbally singing actually increases not just our own complaining spirit and whiny hearts. It gives encouragement to those around us too. Why are they singing like that? And so I would hate it if church became a place where it's like, why are they trying to sing so hard? What are they trying to be all spiritual for? If this isn't the place to do it, then what are we doing here? Stay home, right? No, we come and we sing together to encourage each other because this is the God we serve. There's a goodness of God that we want to line ourselves up with, that we need to preach to ourselves and sing for one another, right? That's why we come. And so can I encourage you? You don't have to be like Mariah Carey doing runs or whatever, okay? But there's an invitation, and a strong one from the psalmist. Open up your voice and declare the praise of the Lord, right? We're not looking for performance. We need your voice. You need mine. So that's what the psalmist is trying to say, giving thanks. It is good to give thanks. It helps us out of that cycle of self-absorption. And so why are we giving thanks? He doesn't just say give thanks, right? If I was to ask this, youth kids, what are you most thankful for? Or crosswalk, every time it's always like, I'm glad for my mommy, my daddy, my house, and my food. My pillow, my toothbrush. The psalmist is very clear what he wants to direct our mind on. Look at the text with me. It says here, Verse 2, do declare. It is good to give thanks, to sing praises, to declare your steadfast love in the morning and your faithfulness by night. Steadfast love, that's that phrase. There are certain biblical phrases that just repeat themselves over and over and over again. The psalmist is directly getting this from Exodus 34, verse 6, the self-revelation of God. If you don't know who God is in the Old Testament, right? It's the same one as the New. He wants to make very clear in Exodus 34 who he is. It says this is him speaking, the Lord, Yahweh, Yahweh. A God, he's like, I am a God, merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding, and here's the phrase, steadfast love, hesed love, and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty. What are we giving thanks for? It's not generic stuff. It's a very specific picture in the Old Testament and for the people of God today. It is God's covenant love, his covenant commitment. And what I mean by covenant is when he came to Abraham and said, I will give you a place, I'll make you a people, I'm going to give you this purpose to bless all the nations of the earth. And if I don't live up to this promise, here's some pigeons, cut them in half. That's what will happen to me if I don't deliver on this promise, which is translation, it's going to happen. And into the Mosaic covenant and all the other promises, God is basically saying, my steadfast love is this, that I am committed to you. It's like God has given a vow at the altar to his people. Richer or poor, whether you love me or you don't, I'm with you to the end. Never leaving you, I'm not forsaking you. And you can follow this train of thought all the way to the Old Testament. I mean, you as people who are in church today, you probably could guess that the Old Testament story is not a story about heroes. It's a story actually mostly about failures and the covenant love of God despite it. Even the greatest of them, Abraham shady. David, read Psalm 51. Even when God's people are faithless, he has remained faithful. He's so unwavering. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I was just about to say, like, any moody people in the room? Yes? Yeah. You wake up, you're like, oh, happy. Breakfast, the coffee's hitting today. By lunchtime, life sucks. By afternoon, no one listens, no one cares. And then you watch TV, oh, that was great. I feel so great. Oh, everything's great. Go to sleep. Like, sometimes it's just funny to me how much our demeanor can change so much. It's very human. And what's comforting to me is that the God of the Bible is just so, the theologians call it immutable, so unchanging, so stable. He's so Exodus 34. It is good for us to give thanks to this God of covenant, love, and faithfulness. Maybe this may be the only point you hear this morning is that God is more committed to you than you are even to him. There's beautiful examples of that, probably in parenting. Here's my question. Why does the psalmist tell us this? If you ever read the Psalms, they sometimes feel, as some people have said, very schizophrenic. Thank you, God. You're amazing. My life sucks. Where have you gone? These people are tripping. It's like everywhere. And it kind of does that in verse 5 to 9. How great are your works, O Lord. How your thoughts are very deep, so profound. Verse 6, the stupid man cannot know, the fool cannot understand this, that though the wicked sprout like grass and all evildoers flourish, they are doomed to destruction forever. Wow. That was a transition, wasn't it? I mean, I don't know if you guys ever read the Psalms. You read a psalm a day. Sometimes you're like, I don't know how to apply this. I feel like he's even emotionally unstable, right? It's a very real person. I mean, this isn't David, but it's the psalmist, and a lot of psalmists are kind of like that. It's very comforting for us to read. And I honestly was like, why is this passage in here? And I wonder if it's because in the context of him saying it is good to give thanks, it's because he's seeing this happen live. It's like he's trying to preach to himself and the people around him in the temple. That even though the wicked are prospering, they look like those who, the commentators say, they live like animals. They live to their urges. They are slaves to just their desires, and they only live for just this very short-sighted thing. They live as if there's no God who they have to give account to, and they're perpetually doing evil things and smirking about it. Why are they prospering, God? And then he says, it is good to give thanks to the Lord. I think that's the context. It's almost like he's having to teach himself and remind the people of God, that even though you are following God and the people who aren't are doing all these things, you need to remember it's good to give thanks. Because when you see people doing that, you start asking the questions that the Old Testament people of God would always ask. God, why is justice never going forth? That thing that happened to me at work, no one's going to affirm the wrong that was done there. How come that person won't ever confess that they did me this wrong? And I just had to bear the brunt of it. Where's your righteousness? And I think it's a beautiful thing how the Psalms actually, sometimes they don't even make like this preaching point. It just states lament in certain essence. I don't think this is the main point of Psalm 92, but 60% of the Psalms are about the psalmist just lamenting. The difference between complaining and lamenting is that you bring your complaints to God, and they call it worship. So it's in this context, I think, that the psalmist is like, why are the wicked prospering that he says it is good to give thanks? It's not a coincidence. You and I are called to remember God's past grace, who he is, what he has done, his commitment to us in the face of what seems like injustice and a slowness on God's part to act. But he makes it clear, the people that live in this way, and that could be us or were us, it's not for their blessing, but for their curse. As Jesus said, those who live their lives simply for self-exaltation will be humbled. And the last point I want to talk about today is the reverse of that. Though the wicked will be humbled, the humble will be exalted. Who is the humble? The psalmists are very clear. It's always a contrast in the wisdom sayings, in the wisdom literature. Righteous and unrighteous, right? So here he goes in verse 10. But you have exalted my horn, he's talking to God, like that of the wild ox. That sounds like a weird phrase. It's just basically this picture of the pouring of the oil as he is renewing strength. My eyes have seen, verse 11, the downfall of my enemies. My ears have heard the doom of my evil assailants. Justice will go forth. Wait for it, right? Leave that to God. But here is the word for the righteous, those who want to follow God despite all these things. Verse 12, the righteous flourish like a palm tree and grow like a cedar in Lebanon. They are planted in the house of the Lord. They flourish in the courts of our God. They still bear fruit in old age. They are ever full of sap and green. Declare that the Lord is upright. He is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in him. I don't even know if I quoted. I think I did. If the picture is that the fool, the wicked, sprouts like grass, and the word sprout is kind of like bloom or flower, the picture of the righteous is of a palm tree. How many of you guys love flowers? Yeah? Guys in the room, yeah? You all right? How many of y'all prefer fake flowers for Valentine's Day? Those things last. I like IKEA. It's all right. Okay. The picture here is that the wicked are like flowers. Oh, cute, beautiful. But y'all know what happens to flowers, right? After last week's grad night, beautiful flowers. Thank you, decoration team. We got to take a couple home. It's beautiful. Patricia cut it up, put it on the table. Beautiful little table piece. Next day, we got to throw that thing away. It's dead. It's gross. Please. Okay? And that's a picture. The flower's beauty fades so quickly. And the picture for the people of God is it's not a flower. It's not one post on Instagram. It is of a palm tree, stubbornly planted, positively stubbornly planted in the house of the Lord. And this is the picture for God's people. One of the things I really appreciate that I've learned about God from this church and you, brothers and sisters, is that on the surface, when I came here, I was maybe, I don't know, I guess late 20s, and I was still, man, we got to go for like these on-fire highlight moments, like last night of retreat stuff. Sometimes I'm still feeling that way. We go for like the spiritual highs. One of the things that the picture that the Bible gives is not of these crazy highlights or 15 minutes of fame or like these on-fire moments. It's of a faithful people stubbornly, in the positive sense, bearing fruit until they're old. As you guys may know, and I promise this time I will not quote song lyrics, okay? I will never do that for another 2 weeks, okay? But I'm a big fan of music, apparently. I didn't know that. I mean, I'm not, like, smart or, like, wide listening, but, like, you all know that artist that had that one-hit wonder, right? It's like that one song by that one person, and then you don't know anything else, right, about them. I feel bad because those musical artists slave away to create 12 songs and no one remembers anything from it, right? But say what you will, and I said this in teacher service, I tried to give, I hope to not to make any enemies today, but I tried to give Taylor Swift's new album a listen. I tried to vibe to it. I got to track 3. And then I switched it up, okay? I'm not a hater, but I will have to give credit to where it's due, okay? When you can have a tour that comes out on Disney and you have eras of hits, 6 songs, wardrobe change, next era, another 5 hits. That's pretty incredible, okay? You do another era, another era. They're talking about a body of work, not a one-hit wonder. Sports analogy. I can't believe they gave LeBron James another contract. He's 40, guys. His son is on the team. Y'all see those clips? He'll be like at the free throw line and someone from the Rockets, because they're all young, will come up and be like, I played against your dad. Or like, my dad played against you. And LeBron's like, dang, I'm old, right? But there's something beautiful about like, how can you still be playing a young man's game when you are double their age, right? And I think that picture that the psalmist gives, right, is not, don't seek the highlight, like just these great, spectacular, whatever moments. It's the beautiful thing is when you are bearing fruit when you're old, right? It's that moment on the dance floor at weddings where, how many of you have been married for 50 years? And then that old couple slowly walks up and they enjoy that moment together. That this indeed is cross-country and not a track meet. So, Psalm 92 gives us this vision. It's not about trying to be this little flower, but it's about being a palm tree. Don't grow weary in doing good, saints. Don't lose heart. The longer you do church, there's more reasons to get jaded. And I don't say that because of the church. It's just you try to follow God and you try to serve people. You try to plant yourself in the house of the Lord. You try to read. Sometimes there's something that happens to us where we get so used to the language and the pacing and the rhythms that we lose the goodness of God. How do we not lose that? How do we bear fruit into old age? And I think the message that the psalmist wants to give, that you just plant yourself. You commit yourself in the house of the Lord. And maybe in the New Testament language, I can say this, John 15. Jesus, the temple of the Lord in the flesh, says, remain in me. It is easy to come to Jesus in a moment of, like when all the circumstances are just right. But when you're tired and you're not getting the pat on the back, will you remember the goodness of God? Will you preach it to yourself and hear the phrase, it is good to give thanks? It's good to remember. And he doesn't just say give thanks, be fake grateful. It's give thanks, remember what he has done, remember who he is. Open up your mouth that's been shut for so long and declare praise. Abide in me, Jesus says, and I in you. And you will bear much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. So that's my encouragement for wherever you are in this room, to hear the psalmist's word, it is good to give thanks. It is good to declare his praise. It is good to declare his steadfast love in the morning and his faithfulness by night. So would you pray with me? Father, I thank you so much for you. A lot of us in this room, just being human as we are, still carrying weights and sins that need to be healed and turned from. We come before you not sulking, not throwing ourselves into pity, but we come hearing that you have a word of invitation for us, that every day that we wake up, every morning, every evening, we have a gracious invitation to give thanks to you. That thanksgiving and gratitude would not just be the thing we ought to do, but is the thing we get to do. That it would free us from a spirit of complaint, self-absorption, but would just free us into the joy that you created us for and that Jesus came to set us free to live in. And so all of us in this room, we carry things. Some of us in this room are lamenting things. Loss of loved ones, a loss of a chapter of our lives, a loss of a relationship. But we bring it all before you. We don't pretend that it's all good, but we bring it all before you. And we choose in our brokenness to give you thanks. So God, we thank you so much that you are a God of compassion and of steadfast love. And it's in that, God, that we want to abide in you and bear fruit until old age. We thank you and pray this all in your beautiful name, Jesus.